And for the attorneys, let me assure you the end is in sight. With that, we go to the gentlelady from Wyoming, Mrs. Loomis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, want to thank you, gentlemen, for this long day, and for the families, I offer my most sincere condolences from my constituents. They think about you all the time. First question, Mr. Nordstrom. Now, do I understand you had responsibility for security in Libya while you were there?
That's correct.
And then you left in July, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, before you left, did you make security recommendations to Washington, D.C.?
No, we do a turnover report, but that's not really a place where we put recommendations. It's more laying out the situation, the crime, the political situation, and a lot of that reporting I had done previously with Washington.
And so they had recommendations from you or not?
It's my understanding, yes. They had wanted a transition plan specifically on how we were going to transition from the SST and the DS agents to our local bodyguards. That was submitted to them February 15th.
And do you know, was that implementation plan accepted? Was it implemented?
I never really got any feedback from Washington. That was one of the things that surprised me even when I left post. I was never contacted by DS leadership or management from the date I left on the 26th to this date. The only time I had any interaction was preparing before the October hearings, but they've never contacted me to ask me on thoughts about Libya, suggestions, anything like that.
Mr. Hicks, do you know whether security recommendations were implemented? Were there security recommendations that were implemented?
John Martinek, the RRSO, came on board, and he was following up on many of the things that Eric was working on before to strengthen our security posture in Libya. After the attacks, John and I worked on a list of physical security improvements that had to be made in Tripoli in order for us to remain there. And I cabled that list into the department after Congressman Chaffetz's visit. And I learned later that that cable was not well received by Washington leadership. To the ARB's credit, when they saw that cable, they sent it to Undersecretary Kennedy and insisted that every recommendation in that cable be implemented.
Thank you. I want to switch gears a little bit. Mr. Hicks, are you aware of any efforts by department officials to limit department witnesses' access to information about the attack prior to their testimony before Congress?
I have never seen the classified ARB report. So the answer is, in my respect, yes.
Mr. Nordstrom, do you know whether the State Department consciously sought to limit your awareness of certain information prior to your testimony before this committee?
I'm not aware of that.
Let me ask you this. Mr. Nordstrom, I want to read you an excerpt from an email Ambassador Stevens sent to you and a colleague on July 5th, 2012. The email concerned a draft cable intended to request an extension of security personnel for the embassy, which was ultimately sent on July 9th. Now, the ambassador wrote, "Gentlemen, I have taken a close look at the cable and edited it down and rearranged some paragraphs. My intention was to give more focus to what we are doing to end our reliance on TDY support and to let the department figure out how to staff our needs. If it looks okay, please run it by DS and see if they want it front channel." Then, Mr. Nordstrom, can you briefly explain what Ambassador Stevens meant when he asked you to run it by DS and see if they wanted it front channel?
What he's referring to is the process by which we would send an official State Department cable. I had done that for prior requests, and it was my advice to the ambassador, I do remember that dialogue, that we do in fact send that front channel. Within the Department of State, that is considered to be the official record. If I sent something by email or informally discussed it by telephone, it's still valuable, but unless it's on that cable, it's not official. My experience in the past was that as soon as we put those recommendations, just as Greg just alluded to, as soon as we put that onto an official cable, somehow we were seen as embarrassing the Department of State because we are requiring them to live up to their end of the bargain.
I thank the gentlelady.